It was a quiet Tuesday morning in the glass-covered headquarters of Westbridge Industries. The building smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink. Employees bustled through the lobby with their lanyards swinging, phones pressed to their ears, talking about deadlines, sales targets, and lunch plans. Most people barely noticed the man in the blue uniform pushing his mop bucket toward the elevator. His name was Daniel Harris, and though his job title was janitor, his responsibilities stretched far beyond just keeping floors clean. For Daniel, every corner of this building was part of the life he worked so hard to maintain, a life that revolved entirely around his 8-year-old daughter, Mia. Daniel had been working at Westbridge Industries for almost 4 years. He was well liked, though most interactions were brief, a nod from someone waiting for the elevator, a quick thanks from a manager passing through the hall. Being a single father meant every dollar counted, so Daniel often volunteered for extra shifts. He rarely complained, even when his knees ached or when the fluorescent lights gave him headaches. There was a quiet dignity in the way he went about his work. While others rushed, Daniel noticed things. He noticed the flicker in the hallway lights before they burned out. He noticed the coffee machine that sputtered just before it stopped working. And, as it turned out, he noticed something far more important one morning, something no one else seemed to see. That Tuesday, the CEO, Richard Coleman, had arrived earlier than usual. Daniel spotted him in the lobby around 7:15 a.m., wearing his usual tailored suit. The man was known for his energy, the kind of executive who shook hands firmly, remembered names, and carried himself like nothing could slow him down. But that morning, Daniel saw something different. Richard's face looked pale, and there was a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead, even though the building's air conditioning was running. As Richard walked past, Daniel caught a subtle tremor in the man's left hand. It was quick, the kind of thing most people would dismiss as nerves or tiredness. But Daniel didn't dismiss it. He couldn't. Years earlier, Daniel's late wife, Claire, had suffered from a rare heart condition. He had learned to watch for tiny signs, a change in skin color, an unusual sweat, a brief loss of coordination. The doctors had told him that quick recognition often meant the difference between life and death. So when Daniel saw Richard lean against the reception desk for just a second longer than usual, blinking as if trying to clear his vision, that old sense of alarm flared up inside him. At first, Daniel hesitated. It wasn't his place to question the CEO's health. What if he was wrong? People didn't always appreciate being told they looked unwell, especially by someone they barely knew. Still, as he emptied trash bins on the executive floor later that morning, he passed Richard's office and saw him rubbing his chest lightly. Not dramatically, just a small, circular motion, like he was trying to ease discomfort. That was enough for Daniel to make up his mind. He knocked lightly on the open door. "Mr. Coleman, are you feeling okay?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice gentle. Richard looked up, startled. "I'm fine," he said with a quick smile. "Just didn't sleep much." Daniel nodded, but he didn't move on. "I don't want to overstep, sir, but you don't look fine. I've seen something like this before. I think you might need to get checked by a doctor, now." There was a pause. The kind of pause where two people measure each other in silence. Then Richard's expression softened. "You think it's serious?" Daniel took a breath. "I'm not a doctor. But if it's what I'm afraid it could be, it's better not to wait." Something in Daniel's steady tone must have struck a chord, because within minutes, Richard agreed to let his assistant drive him to a nearby clinic. By noon, word quietly spread through the office that the CEO had been rushed to the hospital. No official details were given, but the whispers ranged from just a checkup to maybe a heart issue. That afternoon, Daniel finished his shift without knowing for sure what had happened. He picked up Mia from school, helped her with homework, and made dinner as usual. But the worry lingered in his mind. The next morning, when Daniel walked into work, the receptionist handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Daniel, your concern yesterday may have saved my life. The doctors say I was on the verge of a major heart attack. If I had ignored the symptoms, I might not be here today. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it. Richard." Along with the note was a request for Daniel to visit the hospital. When he arrived, Richard was sitting up in bed, looking a little tired but alive. He explained that doctors had found a nearly blocked artery. Surgery had already been done to clear it. Another few hours, they said, and the outcome could have been far worse. "You noticed what no one else did," Richard told him. "Even I didn't realize how bad it was." Daniel shrugged modestly. "I just remembered what happened to my wife. I didn't want to see it happen to anyone else." The two men talked for nearly an hour. Daniel shared stories about Mia and the challenges of raising her alone. Richard listened intently, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief at how much Daniel carried on his shoulders. When Daniel finally stood to leave, Richard said, "You've taken care of this building for years. Let me take care of you for once." A week later, an internal announcement went out. Daniel Harris had been promoted to facilities supervisor, with a significant raise and benefits that included full health coverage for him and Mia. But what meant even more to Daniel was the respect he began receiving from people who had barely noticed him before. Employees who used to hurry past him in the halls now stopped to chat. People called him the guy who saved the CEO's life, and while Daniel didn't seek the spotlight, he accepted it with a humble smile. The story spread beyond the office. Local newspapers picked it up, framing it as an inspiring tale about paying attention to the people, and the moments, that others overlook. Some headlines focused on the janitor-turned-hero. Others emphasized the medical aspect, urging readers to learn the warning signs of heart trouble. Daniel, however, saw it simply as a reminder of what his mother had always told him growing up: if you can help, you help. Doesn't matter who it is. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's routine didn't change much. He still mopped the same floors, checked the same light bulbs, and carried the same ring of jangling keys. But there was a new lightness in his step. Knowing that speaking up had made such a difference gave him a quiet confidence. And when Mia found out exactly what had happened, she told all her friends at school that her dad was a hero. Daniel didn't argue, because in her eyes, maybe he was. Months later, at the company's annual holiday gathering, Richard surprised Daniel by calling him to the stage. In front of hundreds of employees, he retold the story of that morning, the symptoms, the warning, the hospital. "Daniel saw something I didn't," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "He didn't let fear or doubt stop him. And because of that, I get to stand here today." The crowd erupted in applause. Some people stood. Mia, sitting near the front, clapped so hard her hands turned red. Daniel felt his face warm, but he also felt proud. Not for the attention, but for the simple truth that sometimes doing the right thing could change everything. That night, after the speeches and music and laughter, Richard pulled Daniel aside.